Bom dia, boa tarde, boa noite, or whatever the case may be. My name is Marcus, and I am the host of the Black Brazil Today YouTube channel, as well as the blackbraziltoday.com blog, where I analyze Brazil from the perspective of race. So I can honestly say that the video that I'm recording today, it's been a long time coming. I've been wanting to talk about this particular soccer player for a while. I actually did make a video about him. I don't know, probably been a month or two, maybe 2 months ago, 3 months, I'm not sure. But uh, that video wasn't really about the topic that I'm going to be covering today, because every time his name comes up, I'm like, I really do have to introduce my audience to what's going on with this young man. I mean, can you imagine? Just when you listen to what this young man has gone through, particularly over the last 3 years, just imagine what that must feel like. I think, Vinicius Jr. I think he's about 23, and the hostility that he gets over in Europe is just, it's absurd. I can't even imagine being in his shoes, right? So I wanted to talk about this because this has been going on for a number of years, but I'm bringing it to the fore now because of a way that he recently reacted. And obviously it went viral. Everybody's talking about it. So I wanted to bring it to my audience today. The name of the video: after scoring goal, Vinicius Jr. responds to racist crowd with a black fist. Soccer star has been the victim of racism in European soccer stadiums just numerous times over the last few years. It's crazy. So before I get into this video, make sure you like this video, share the video, subscribe to the channel, click on the notification bell. And with that, let's get into this video, because just sit back and just listen. If you're not familiar with Vinicius Jr. and his experience, and particularly in the Spanish league playing soccer, this is something you want to listen to. So let's get directly into this video for today. Okay, so after scoring a goal, Vinicius Jr. responds to a racist crowd with a black fist. Why is this important? Because I haven't really talked a lot about this. I might have touched upon it in a previous video, but the previous video where I discussed a little bit about Vinicius and other Brazilian soccer players playing in Europe, it wasn't directly tied to his experiences on the pitch in Europe. Today, I want to go over this recent incident and why it's such a big deal. This could be, I don't know, a watershed moment. This could be an historical moment for a Brazilian soccer player, right? So let's just talk about this. In this video, there's a few things I want to discuss. Obviously, this happened in Europe. So as my video channel and blog talks about how racism functions in Brazil, this is, between United States, which Brazil is always compared to, or what we got going in Brazil, or what's going on in Europe. This is a global situation that people continuously want to try to just push this under the rug like it's not a big deal. I'm just saying, people in their heart of hearts, when they see these type of things happen to black players or just black people in general, in the heart of heart, they know they can't dismiss this. Because I would just ask any person who is not black, you watch displays of just vicious racism against somebody like Vinicius, and ask yourself, would you want to trade places with a black person? That's just honestly the question. You can say to anybody that I don't think racism is a problem. And I'm not saying the racism that we have today is the same as what we had, say, 100 years ago or even 75 years ago, but it's still there. Now, whether we can debate on what the influence is on the lives of person of African descent, that's another thing. But when you see incidents like this, you can just ask yourself, no matter how much money Vinicius has, would you want to deal with this? Somebody actually did something like that. How much money would it take for you to switch places with a black person? It's an intriguing question. So global racism, what's going on with Vinicius, also speaks to racism in Brazilian society, which I'm going to explain why, even though this happened in Europe. Brazil's favorite racial insult against black people, and all of you should probably know what that is. And then how Vinicius' gesture was done in Europe, but it can also be applied to Brazil. So let's just get into it. This is Vinicius Jr. He plays for Real Madrid over in Spain, in this, one of the Spanish soccer leagues. At 23 years old, Vinicius Jose Paixão de Oliveira Jr., or simply Vini Jr., is one of the best football players of this generation of Brazilian superstars. Known for his speed, dazzling dribbling, and scoring potential, Vini is recognized as one of the best players in the world today. Okay. After coming to prominence playing for Rio de Janeiro's famed Flamengo team, like hundreds of other top Brazilian soccer stars, Vinicius Jr. took his talents to Europe after only playing part of the 2017-18 season for the team known for its red and black colors. Okay, Flamengo. Vini plays for the La Liga club called Real Madrid, as I just said. In May of 2017, Real Madrid signed Vinicius to a contract that would go into effect shortly after his 18th birthday in July of 2018. I see a lot of this European soccer scouts. Brazil has been a source of top players going over to Europe for a number of decades now, and they'll come over there and scout these players. Well, they're still underage. It's like they'll sign them up, and they have intent to bring the player over to Europe, but they have to wait until he turns 18. That was the case with Vinicius Jr. as well. The cost for the transfer was 46 million euros, a price tag that was second only to the sale of another soccer superstar Brazilian, Neymar, in the history of Brazilian soccer. One of the biggest, price-wise transfers for a Brazilian player to go over and play in Europe. The cost of Vini Jr.'s transfer was the largest amount ever received by a Brazilian soccer team and the highest figure a team has ever paid for a soccer player under the age of 19. Vini hasn't looked back since, appearing in various tournaments. The player has won all sorts of honors and awards playing for Real Madrid, as well as Brazil's national team, or the Seleção, as Brazilians call the team. Vini Jr. is also ranked as one of the most valuable players in the world in terms of what is called the expected transfer value, which estimates the cost of certain players being transferred to other soccer teams. Okay, that's something that when I said I had spoken about this, it was back in, I guess, February. Maybe it was back in February when I did a video about this. So I posted this on the blog a little bit later than after I put the video up. So I think I might have posted on February 19th on the blog, but it was earlier than that, on the video channel. And this is just talking about how Vinicius Jr. and Rodrygo, two Brazilians, are among the 5 highest valued players in the world. There are 9 other Brazilians in the top 100. That's big news. This is Vinicius and Rodrygo, the stars of the Real Madrid team. I talked a little bit about all of these Brazilian soccer players, 50 best Brazilian players in the European season. All of these players here, the list of 50 best Brazilian players of the European season. You have some of the highest paid Brazilian players over there. Obviously, Neymar, I think he plays over in one of the Muslim countries these days. Then I talked about how Jay-Z had actually bought the sports management agency that took care of Vinicius and a number of other Brazilian soccer stars. I always wondered what that was all about. That's a whole nother story. So a lot of big news having to do with Vinicius. Obviously, he's a high quality player. He's one of the top paid players. He has one of the top transfer values. So this is the reason why this is so big. This is a guy of this caliber earning this type of money, and he still has to go through some of these absurdities, in European soccer leagues. Let me see here. If this was all that was to, Vinicius' career in Europe, it would be a fairy tale, but unfortunately that isn't the case. Black and brown Brazilian players have long been a target of racist abuse in European soccer stadiums, and Vinicius Jr. has been one of the most victimized players. I've lost count of how many times Vini has been the target of racist chants, monkey chants, and gestures, on the part of soccer fans in Spain. To give you an idea, below I will present just 10 of these incidents that made headlines. There are actually more, but you'll get the idea. Now, just before I move on into that, specifically talking about Vinicius Jr., as I said before, when you look at it, this is an article from Agência Brasil website. The offenses to Vinicius Jr. are part of the history of racism in soccer, or football, what they call it. Now, this article just highlights some of the incidents involving Brazilian soccer players over in Europe. 2011, it happened to Roberto Carlos. 2011, Neymar. 2014, Daniel Alves. 2015, Hulk. Tyson and Dentinho. Maicon. Vinicius Jr. several times. Neymar again. Richarlison. All of these are Vinicius Jr. again and again and again. So this is something that has been plaguing Brazilian soccer players over in Europe for a number of years. But the reason why I want to point that out is that it's not just in Europe. Brazil has long downplayed. There was once upon a time when black Brazilian players were not allowed to play in the major leagues and the major teams. in Brazilian soccer. So even if I'm talking about this is happening over in Europe, this also speaks to the situation in Brazil. Let me see if I have, like, for example, here. Now, a lot of these, it's because Vinicius is in the middle with all of this right now. He's the one who's getting all of the headlines because he's usually the target of, racist incidents. These are just, all of these stories here are talking about some form of racism, whether it's in Europe or in Brazilian soccer. It's just absurd. Racism against Vinicius Jr. and other players. 100 years ago, Black players were excluded from Brazil's national team, but that's not racist, right? Let me see, what else do we have here? I wanted to highlight a couple of these stories before I moved on. So I say this speaks to Brazilian society as well, because what is Brazil's favorite racial insult for Black people? It is monkey. You go to blackbrazil.com and just use the keyword monkey, and you're going to see all of these headlines here. And this is just, I could cover this all the time, but I'm just saying it's just a normal part of Brazilian reality. People can deny this all they want, but calling somebody a macaco or a macaca in Brazil is as normal as speaking Portuguese. I just put it that way. That's why I say what's going on with Vinicius in Europe speaks to the situation in Brazil as well. There's no way to separate the two, even though we're talking about places, on the other side of the Atlantic, right? So, cases of racism against Vinicius Jr. in Spain, a constant target of criminal prejudice, right? The first story here is courtesy of the Gold website. Racism is an evil that lives on, often with impunity in society. It's no different in soccer, and the criminal insults directed at Real Madrid's Vinicius Jr. at matches in Spain are causing outrage as the episodes continue to mount. From the striker's arrival in Spanish soccer to the present day, there have been more than 10 obvious cases of racial violence directed at the Brazilian. That was just at that time. There's been more since then. The most recent of these in the La Liga match against Valencia, it prompted strong repercussions from Vinicius Jr. himself, who even accused La Liga of complacency in dealing with the case. Below, we take a look at the most famous episodes of racism directed at Vinicius Jr. It's a list we can't see getting any longer. Obviously, I disagree with that because this is still going on. This is just an article from maybe last year. So, examples: Valencia versus Real Madrid 2023. The most recent episode took place on May 21st, 2023, when Valencia fans chanted, calling Vinicius Jr. a monkey, a macaca. I think the term is mono in Spain. It's intriguing because recently a child in the audience at one of these games was calling Vinicius a macaco from the audience, from the stands, and a Brazilian woman who happened to be there, recorded that. I have to talk about that in another video. The match was interrupted, but when the ball started rolling again, Vinicius Jr. was sent off and left the pitch in anger at the insults directed at him. The Valencia team has said that they will identify the fans and ban them from the club for life. Okay. Girona versus Real Madrid 2023. After scoring one of Real Madrid's goals in a 4-2 win, Girona fans called Vini a monkey. The case went unnoticed without any kind of protest from the bodies involved in the game. Barcelona versus Real Madrid 2023. Barca fans once again called Vini Jr. a monkey and also chanted "die." The Barcelona and La Liga courts of inquiry were called in and dealt with the episode by saying that the racist behavior is intolerable. Yeah, I'm sure. So what are you doing about it? Real Betis versus Real Madrid in 2023. The scene is repeated. Opposing fans feel free to call Vinicius Jr. a monkey. The episode led to a complaint being lodged with the Seville Regional Court. La Liga also filed a complaint with the Andalusian City's Investigative Court. Osasuna versus Real Madrid 2023. Another episode of fans calling the Brazilian a monkey. Television cameras caught the insults, but the perpetrators have not been identified. Mallorca versus Real Madrid 2023. The second case involving Mallorca, this time the fan who calls Vinicius Jr. a monkey was identified through a video on TikTok. In addition to a fine of 4,000 euros, was banned from attending stadiums for a year. Atletico de Madrid versus Real Madrid 2023. Ahead of a game in the Spanish capital, Atletico Madrid fans have once again been the protagonists of regrettable episodes of prejudice. This time, a doll of Vini Jr. was hung from a bridge. La Liga filed a complaint with the Madrid Court of Instruction, and the case is still ongoing. After almost 4 months later, the Spanish police released a video showing the release of young men aged 19, 21, 23, and 24, all of whom were suspected of carrying out the scene of Vinicius's hanging, Vinicius hanging with the dial representing Vinicius. According to the authorities, one of those arrested had a record of bodily harm. You have Real Valladolid versus Real Madrid in 2022. Black bastard, black-ish, and you know what that means. Were the insults uttered by Valladolid fans in the final days of 2022? The club managed by former Brazilian soccer star, or who they call Ronaldo Phenomenal, identified 11 fans and withdrew their season tickets. Atletico de Madrid versus Real Madrid 2022. Before the match between Atletico and Real, the racist insults took place at the El Chiringuito show, one of Spain's most famous TV programs. On the occasion, journalist Pedro Bravo criticized the dances used by Vinicius Jr. to celebrate his goals and said, "Stop doing monkey business." Shortly before the match, Atletico Madrid fans gathered around the Metropolitano Stadium, chanted and called the striker a monkey. The whole situation inspired the Baile Vini movement, the Vini dance movement, encouraging the young star to celebrate the way he likes best. Mallorca versus Real Madrid 2022. Mallorca fans imitated monkey sounds directed at Vini Jr. They also chanted for the Real Madrid player to pick up bananas. Barcelona versus Real Madrid 2021. The first strongest episode involving racial prejudice against Vinicius Jr. took place during the game against Barcelona. At the Camp Nou, Culés fans chanted racist slurs as Vinicius Jr. left the pitch, having been substituted. A complaint was made to the Hate Crime Analysis Department of the Barcelona Public Prosecutor's Office. It wasn't enough, which brings us to the story that I'm talking about today. Vinicius Jr. scores twice, sends a message to racist fans in Valencia. In the same stadium in May of 2023, the Brazilian player suffered racial slurs uttered in chorus by fans in the stands. This Saturday, March 2nd, he scored 2 goals that prevented Real Madrid from losing. So this was a huge event. I saw this all over the internet, social networks for the last few days. They're calling this gigantic 2 goals and a gesture for history. Of course, a lot of us are familiar with this gesture from the 1968 Olympics. I mean, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this. This could be I don't know, maybe this is the Brazilian version of that, okay? This is how big this is. This Saturday, Vinicius Jr., once again, the star of the Valencia-Real Madrid match at the home of the Valencians. Last season, it was the Estádio Mestalla that the Brazilian suffered the most racial abuse of his career. This time, the racism was more on the outside of the stadium, a banner calling him a Pinocchio or a liar for revealing the racism he had suffered. They're calling him a liar, even though we've seen how many times he's been a victim of racism, and it's also mostly on video. And, they were booing him. On the pitch, Vinicius Jr. was instrumental in making sure Real Madrid didn't leave the field with a defeat. After conceding 2 goals, the Brazilian scored the 2 goals that made it 2-2. It's another picture of his, if you can see, I'm going to show you another angle of it. If you see the video, you'll see the hostility of the fans who are seeing him put his fist up, in their direction. I mean, you just take a look at it. See how the people are reacting in the stands. They feel free to abuse him, but then when he reacts, they can't handle that. The Brazilian striker scored for Real Madrid at the end of the first half, putting the Valencians up, putting the Valencians up 2-0. So the goal had a special flavor. Vini didn't say anything, but he said everything with his action. After running out to celebrate the goal, he stopped on the pitch, turned to the fans, raised his arm, and clenched his fist in a gesture typical of the anti-racist struggle. This was huge. It's all over social networks, In the same stadium in May of 2023, the Brazilian player was racially insulted by fans in the stands. It was an episode that had wide repercussions worldwide, sparking demands for severe punishment in the event of racist insults, okay? So that's why I wanted to bring this story to you, because this is huge. Anybody who's on the receiving end of this type of abuse, people are going to always just be human, and I really felt for this guy, I felt for Vini Jr. because this is something that he's always going through. You know, Real Madrid's Vinicius Jr. accuses Spain's La Liga of racism. This is from May of 2023. What do they have against this guy? I'm just curious. Why is it that Vinicius Jr. is the one that's getting all of this? These are all the headlines. You know, I've read them in Portuguese and in English. You punch in, racism, Vinicius Jr., you're going to see it. Let me see. Vinicius Jr. abuse timeline. They're just giving you dates and games like I just did of when he suffered this abuse. Real Madrid, Vinicius Jr. returned to Valencia after racist abuse. All of these, I mean, it's all over the place. 7 people arrested in relation to incidents, racist abuse of Vinicius. They're analyzing the facts because when these stories first started coming out, the authorities were ignoring it like this wasn't a big deal. Racial abuse against Vinicius Jr. brings arrest. They're probing racial abuse against Vinicius Jr. in Clásico. I mean, it just goes on and on. So I mean, like I said, you put yourself in a young man's place, and it was like, this is something that I saw. It's like, Vinicius crying on the field because this is constantly his experience. I mean, what do you feel when you see these pictures? I mean, should any black player or any player of any race, but particularly black players, because black players are always subjected to this type of abuse? I mean, does he deserve this? Why is this? And I'm speaking, Brazilians have nothing to stand on when they want to look and see, oh, why are they treating him like that? When we know that this type of thing happens in Brazil at the same time. Brazil is very just infamous. This particular case right here, or these articles right here, specifically speaking on not only just global racism in soccer, but those particularly happening in Brazil. In Brazil, among blacks, 41.8% say they already suffered racism. They're shining a spotlight, or they're doing an x-ray of the cases of racism in Brazilian soccer. See the recent cases of racism in Brazilian soccer. So this is why I say Vinicius's gesture, his black fist in the air, this is not just to Europe. This goes all the way back to where he's from. This goes across the Atlantic back over to Brazil. Cases of racism in Brazilian football in 2022, what it says it equals the number of the entire season from the previous year. Okay. Offenses against Vinicius Jr. are part of the history of racism in, what does this say? In racism in Brazilian football, or just in football in general. Cases of prejudice against athletes grows 40%. It goes on and on. Cases of racism in Brazilian football beats a record. The 2022 season of Brazilian football had 233 cases of racism registered. I mean, it just goes on and on. What more can be said? People still want to deny this. They want to just push this off as just people just, whining, just get over it. Is that the way you deal with this? So wherever black people go, they have their humanity stripped away by people referring to them as monkeys, gorillas, and just animals. And that's just cool. We're supposed to just get over that. Now, mind you, Vinicius, I admire the way that he's able to stand strong in the face of all of this hostility. But why does this always have to happen with black players? So anyway, just curious to know what you all thought about this particular story. This could be a historic moment in Brazilian soccer among Brazilian athletes, because a lot of people have accused black Brazilian athletes of being a little bit passive towards racism. But the last 5 or 10 years, people are speaking out, people are pushing back, people are standing strong. And I really admire to see this gesture of Vinicius Jr., as well as other players who are starting to stand up and say no more. So anyway, curious to know what you thought about this video today. Definitely leave a comment in the comment section. Like this video, share this video. Consider subscribing to this channel. Click on the notification bell so you'll know when I put up new videos. And with that said, I'm going to end the video here and request that you all come back. Check out the next video that I post.